Hey people, how's it going? Today I want to talk about art. Art is a controversial thing, but let's just jump into it. So, there are two kinds of art, and this is a subject where a lot of people with berets and cigarettes in their mouths and, I don't know, degrees from university have opinions. They have opinions about these things, and a lot of them are kind of trash. So let's just cut through it all and just go straight to the heart of the matter. And I want to reference an occultist, Gurdjieff, in this, where his take on art is basically that there's two types of art. There is subjective art and objective art. Subjective is a type of art where everyone can look at it and everybody can get something different out of it. And this can be good, because fundamentally this form of art is like a mirror. So everyone looks into the mirror and they all basically reflect themselves into it, and it can be kind of a psychological thing, like, oh, I saw this in this art, and it gives them a psychological reflection or comprehension of themselves. They comprehend themselves through the art. But there's a different type of art that's not subjective. There's a type of art that is objective. And this type of art's very interesting because this is when an artist imbues a work with something. And doesn't necessarily have to be a meaning. It can be imbued with a virtue, like an old Roman statue, it can be imbued with a certain emotion, even there can be a certain tragedy in a statue that has that emotion imbued into it. There's no doubt what it means. And yes, people's perceptions can still veil over an art piece, and they can see it wrongly, but that's why some people need an aesthetic sense to be cultivated. It's good to dip into art every so often, but realizing that some art is it's merely a mirror. It only has really psychological value, but there's some art that can have transcendental value, like great poems from mystics are something very potent, because a transcendental experience, or a mystical experience that someone has in like a religious experience, you can't really, or it's very difficult to describe that to a normie. But if you're a good poet like William Blake or Rumi, you can describe transcendental experiences in a way that is beautiful, at once beautiful, but also strikes a normie in the emotions and gets them to feel something a little more or a little differently than they would have, and that orientates them towards the divine. And so this is objective art. Objective art can be a tool. And why am I talking about this? I know maybe you've read the title of the video, so it's no surprise. I want to talk about a little piece of modern art called Neon Genesis Evangelion. So this is really interesting. This little this anime from China. No, just kidding. This Chinese cartoon is really interesting, guys. This animation is imbued. I would call it objective art. It is imbued with something by its creator. And some of you who are more well versed in this may say, "Hold on, hold up." This, I've seen that interview with the creator who says actually it doesn't mean anything. I know what I'm talking about. He just slapped in random religious symbols because he thought it was cool. And to that I would say, no, you're wrong. And yeah, he may have said that, but here's my thesis on why you're wrong. So, if you actually study something, and in this case, the creator of Neon Genesis has clearly dipped his toes into Kabbalah more than an average person. So he's dipped his toes into Kabbalah, which is a mystical system, and he clearly has some understanding of it, and he's represented it and its end goal in a specific way. And he's put his own emotions and his own life experience into this anime. And so when you do all of that, when a normie comes up to someone who's had an esoteric experience, if you're not a poet, if you're not articulate, a lot of the time there's nothing to say. Like, what's the old, when a man came and asked the Buddha what is truth, and the Buddha just turned around and walked away. Or the same thing. It was the same with this one with Jesus as well. When they asked Jesus what is truth, he just remained silent. In my mind, as someone who's who has a slight understanding of Kabbalah, it's like I can totally imagine the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion just kind of being there, and someone being like, so what does it mean? And him just looking at them and going, these guys are never going to get it. And really, it's also this is a very occultist attitude as well. Like, this is kind of what the alchemists did. It's like, if someone's going to get it, they're going to get it. There's no point in me explaining this. So he just said, oh, it doesn't mean anything. Because normies are just going to be like, okay, I can just treat it how I want to treat it. But people who actually know, they can actually pierce the veil, and they'll do it anyway. It doesn't matter what he says, and he knows this. So that's my take on why the creator says, it doesn't really mean anything. It just sort of looks cool. But let's take him at his word. Let's say I'm wrong, and let's say he really did just throw some random symbols together. So this, in a symbol itself is not a dead thing. This is something you have to understand. A lot of, postmodernists nowadays, when they talk about symbols, they say things like, symbols, culture gives symbols their values and their meanings. So a symbol can be corrupted and you can't use it anymore. Like, say, the swastika symbol. It was once an ancient symbol of the Hindus, or, it was in a lot of cultures as well. I would say it's an ancient Hindu symbol, and the Germans took it, now it's corrupted, and you can never use the swastika again because of what happened in 1945s. Damn Austrian painters, always ruining everything. But the thing is, no, that's wrong. If a symbol is truly esoteric, then it's not that the symbol, has a meaning applied to it. Yes, a symbol can always have a meaning applied to it, but it also means that there is something behind the symbol, something that is real and alive, and it speaks to you through that symbol. This is what Carl Jung would call the archetype. Archetypes and symbols are not the same thing. An archetype can be represented by a symbol, but the archetype is the thing behind the symbol. Capiche? So, this is one of those things that's very interesting. In merely using esoteric symbols to a degree, he has objectified his art. Objectification in this sense. I may be using it in a wrong way, but it has been made into objective art in the way that Gurdjieff would say objective art. It is part transcendental merely because it has one image of a Kabbalah in it. Let me whip that up for you. Where is it? Here we are. Boom. This is one of the end scenes in Neon Genesis Evangelion. So, what is this image? What is this image? Let me bring it over here. What is this image? So, if you study Jewish mysticism, there is an image called Kabbalah. Did a little other kind of video talking about it. It is as much Jewish as technically you could say European. It has a long lineage, and debatably you could say things like, the Psalms are 100% Kabbalistic. But Kabbalah as we know it comes into existence around the Middle Ages. Basically, when alchemy enters Europe, so Kabbalah just pops into existence. You get books like the Sefer Yetzirah, you get books like the Zohar, you get books like the Sefer Behir and things like that. And later on the Sefer Raziel, etc., 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 and it all comes down, and then you get Christian Kabbalah and Hermetic Kabbalah, etc., etc. But the whole thing is okay, he uses this symbol, so what? How does this make the series objective art? But you have to understand what the series is aiming towards. All through the series, they're talking about something. There's talk of something called human instrumentality. There's metaphysical biology. There's ego borders. There's the gates of Guf. But they're used in very appropriate ways for something that has no meaning. So what's one of the objectives of Kabbalah? Well, Kabbalah in and of itself is a map. It's a map of the universe, but it is simultaneously a map of man. To use the Hermetic adage, as above, so below. So if you understand the universe and that the Kabbalistic spheres are like different dimensions, you can also understand that they are all, we exist in each of those dimensions. Okay, So why can't I experience those dimensions? Well, unfortunately for us, we are asleep. We are bound, as Heidegger would say, into this space-time. We have a three-dimensional psychology. Our brain or something in us is sealed shut like a valve, and we cannot experience those other dimensions, but we exist in each of those dimensions. So there's this bifurcation or a fractalization of the human being. We are not just one thing, we are many things that have shattered into all parts of the universe. And in this case, the universe isn't just something physical, but it's multi-dimensional. 10 spheres being the 10 different dimensions. Although there can be other dimensions if you include the Ein Sof and Ein or Ein Sof Eir or other things like that, or the Cliff Oath even. But nonetheless, there are generally 10 spheres if you don't include Darth. Let's not talk about Darth. That's just really complicated. If you don't, there's mainly 10 spheres. So those spheres are different dimensions. We exist in those dimensions, or inside us, our psychology is 10-dimensional, really, and we unlock that by going within ourselves. But the whole thing is the human being is also one being, the human being is one being. The entirety of the human race is connected. Carl Jung would say this is the collective unconsciousness. But it also means that if you go deep enough, you connect to that collective. So esoterically, if you pierce through the layers of ego, the layers of self, the layers of this is me, and I'm just this, and that's it. If you pierce through enough and your ego border shatters enough, you connect to everything on the world and you experience yourself as one with everything. So this is where the idea of Adam Kadmon comes in Kabbalistic theology, if you could call it that. So Adam Kadmon is this primordial being that humanity is created out of, or it's the original being. But then the original being gets kind of cut up, and so it's said that as humans we all have souls, but all of those souls are basically all one. They're all Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon basically broken to pieces, and we're all an individual part of that one being. It's kind of like if in like Greek mythology, in Roman mythology, there's a god called Bacchus, and a part of his story is he's a dead god. He's kind of like he's Bacchus. He's kind of a god of beauty, and he looks into a pond, contemplates himself, and falls in love with his own image. And while he's hypnotized by himself, the titanic beings arise behind him and tear him to pieces and devour him. Jupiter, seeing this horrendous act, gets Hermes or Mercury to come in to rescue the heart of Bacchus. So Bacchus still lives, even though he doesn't have a body, and then simultaneously uses a thunderbolt and destroys the Titans. But out of the titanic matter arises humanity. So humans, we all are made out of titanic matter, but our soul, what's in us, that thing that's good, that thing that's eternal, is Bacchus. So humanity is like a fractalization of one god that has fallen and broken into pieces. So when we redeem ourselves, we wait until a point for everyone else to come back, and then eventually we all fuse together in one perfect multiple unity. And this is Adam Kadmon. Or in Jewish mythology or Kabbalistic mythology, it's that Adam Kadmon breaks into pieces and these souls collect behind the doors of Guf, or the chambers of Guf. Once again, this is also something that's brought up in the series, opening the doors of Guf. We have a shadowy organization called Sile. We have the enemies of the show, the angels, with all angelic names. It's just, more and more kind of things pile up, and it's like, yeah, man, but the creator said it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so what's the point of Kabbalah then? One of the points of Kabbalah is the regeneration of man. It's same as alchemy, basically. It has the same goal. The regeneration of man. The redivinization. Abrahamic religions, because it's Christian, we've raised in a Christian society, we know the basic rundown, that we fell from the Garden of Eden. So there's a fall, and that we need to be redeemed. But the whole reason why these systems are esoteric is, church is just like, just go to church and you'll be redeemed. It's a cool story, bro. Esoteric systems say, no, you need to take part in this redemption. You need to follow some kind of path. There's something that you need to do. Like Carl Jung, his thing was individuation. This reconciles. Redemption is really individuation. God is really a state of consciousness that we ourselves can attain. So in this sense, Kabbalah is something that is supposed to regenerate us. So you have to understand that we are not the end of evolution. We are not the apex creature on earth. We are actually fallen. We are fallen angels or a fallen god. So Kabbalah is to regenerate us, to bring us back to the light. That's a part of the Kabbalistic path. Shattering the Kabbalistic vessel so the sparks can re-arise, go back up the tree and ascend back to the crown. So what happens in this series? So you're basically regenerating Adam Kadmon as a part of Kabbalah. So what happens in this series? This Kabbalah happens. Well, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this decade-old anime, or when did it came out? Is it 20 years ago now? Holy crap, I'm so old. Spoiler alert for the end of the series, everybody on Earth dies and is turned into LCL fluid, so they're kind of turned into the universal fluid, and they get absorbed into one single being who's as big as the planet. So if you see, look at all these chickens, all of these crosses, this red thing here that you see at the bottom. Let me just enlarge this. That red thing at the bottom, that's the planet Earth. All of that red, it's not blood. It's actually just the humans bursting and turning into fluid, and that's light. The light, the souls, the vessels being broken. And then this being here is, absorbing it all back into one point. So what is this? This giant being that's kind of the size of a planet or a moon. This giant being, for lack of better words, is Adam Kadmon. It has a female breasts, but there's another part where it kind of splits and it has a male form. So it's a dual, it's androgynous, or it's a hermaphroditic. It has both genders. It's so, and this is what Seeley was trying to achieve. They were trying to achieve human instrumentality. Some people who take the series more seriously, they've interpreted Seeley as like a Gnostic organization who peer into the Dead Sea Scrolls and they want to initiate human instrumentality, which is to have everyone basically absorb into one being, so that there's no individuals, so that there's no more suffering. If everybody no longer has an ego, if ego is completely annihilated, and we all absorb into one being, then there's nothing left but being itself, just pure being, pure existence, pure love, free in its form. And so it's this very interesting thing. What's the aim of Kabbalah? To regenerate man into Adam Kadmon. What happens in this series that has no meaning? The entirety of the earth. The main character gets crucified in the middle of a goddamn Kabbalah, literally the glyph, and then everybody on the planet gets absorbed into a single being, or a single point. That's so interesting. I can't believe this show, this Chinese cartoon, has no meaning. So, very interesting. That's just my take, by the way. You're free to have your own shtick. A lot of other people have done a lot of really cool deep analysis. I mean, if you're watching this, you've probably seen them all anyway. You've seen the guy who talks for an hour about assembling all the different timelines of Neon Genesis into one, or you've seen the guy comparing it to Carl Jung, or someone who or you've read an article that maybe has some Kabbalistic references, putting characters on the different spheres and stuff. Like, I don't know, Gendo's Chesed or something, because he's kind of like Abraham, which he's not really. He's a bit of a jerk. Yeah, so it's a good series. Check it out. I believe, the rebuilds. I believe the fourth one's come out recently, so let's all get on that. See what the crescendo of this series is. Let's see if it's really Kabbalistic, if he's stuck with the Kabbalah, or if he's gone more Gnostic. But I don't know. What about the final end of the series? Maybe I should give my thoughts on that. And that final end, it's very interesting how everyone's absorbed into one. And Shinji, really, he's technically given the supreme mantle of humanity, because in the end, everyone's reduced to before creation. So they don't have, they don't have thought. There's no mind. The only one who's left really is Shinji, and all those people speaking to him are really just reflections in his memory. One thing that's interesting to note, but which I've always found interesting, is when Shinji is speaking to the images of all of his friends in the last episodes or in the last part of the movie, Gendo is absent. So if you see all of the people in the show as different parts of the being, as different parts of the self, as different spheres on the Kabbalah, Gendo as a sphere is not integrated. It is an imperfect integration. He reconciles with everyone except for Gendo. So something is incomplete. So at the end of the series, Shinji chooses to be separate, and that restarts creation. So, and it's very interesting to note then, when you watch the rebuilds, which may or may not be a new timeline, that he's just restarted, and the start of the rebuilds is actually the end. Is actually the end of the old series or something. It's interesting to note that this Shinji in the rebuilds is actually quite different. And if you notice in the rebuilds, he talks to Gendo, and he actually wants to get to know him, and there's even a scene where it's like, hey Dad, can I have dinner at your house? He's trying to reintegrate with his father. So it'll be interesting to see if, at the end of this final series, what is it, Evangelion 3+1 rebuild, or is it 4 or whatever, if there's merely going to be a new cycle, an infinite cycle, and Kaoru is the only one who perfectly remembers everything. But it'll be interesting to see if Shinji finally reconciles with his father. How very Kabbalistic. But nonetheless, we'll see how it goes. See if this series is truly a reflection on Kabbalah. I don't know. If you really liked this, give it a like and subscribe. But also, I don't know, do you want to see something more like this? Because there's something to be said. A lot of anime people who have written manga and directed anime clearly have some esoteric backing. I'm looking at Full Metal Alchemist, specifically Brotherhood, and I'm also looking at the clear and blatant Neoplatonism in the Berserk series. If you want to see some videos on that, just, I don't know, put a comment down below. Anyway, what do you think about this objective piece of art known as Neon Genesis Evangelion? I think it's basically one man's rendition of the Kabbalistic path. That's just what I think. I could be wrong.